show. This is a segment we call Around the National. And,
yes.
you know, we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks talking about the quote-unquote turtle race in the West.
Yes.
The three teams vying for the final wildcard spot, the Winnipeg Jets, the Calgary Flames, and the Nashville Predators. And for the Calgary Flames, they've been a team that, you know, despite a tough season, are still in it. And I saw this board over the weekend and immediately DM'd it to EJ Raddick.
Yes.
On Twitter. I could have texted him, could have called him.
Interesting
but
choice.
I opted for the DM route.
Yeah.
But take a look at this, because in close
It's amazing.
games, the Calgary Flames have not been good. You look at losses in one-goal games. They have 27 losses in one-goal games. That's worst in the NHL. Losses in overtime or a shootout, they got 15. That's tied for 31st in the NHL, so second to worst. Losses when getting outshot, 29th in the NHL, or excuse me, they have 29 of those, last in the NHL. They've also lost a ton of games where they outshoot their opponents. I believe they're somewhere in the bottom of the league for that. And then third period comebacks, they seem to have no pushback in the third period because they have not had a single third period comeback all season long. No surprise, when it's a 0 on the board, you're probably going to be last place in the NHL in that category as well. So you look at those numbers, guys, and I'm just curious, what do those numbers tell you about the way that this season has gone for the Calgary Flames and the way that they've played?
Well, you said it. There's been very little pushback in games, right? And they've had some bad fortune. They're hitting the post more than other teams. So, I mean, that's, you know, it's hard to maybe explain why you would lead in that category. But the bottom line for me is, and we've talked a little bit about this last couple of weeks, Jackie, is they're not getting to the middle of the ice enough. They're not getting good scoring chances from the middle of the ice. The scoring chances they're getting are from the outside for the most part. And watching them, the eye test to me early in the season, the eye test was not good. We've talked about it here, Jack, right? I said I was out on the Calgary Flames probably in late November, early December, just because they just didn't look like the same group, and they've never kind of found their way this year.
Yeah. Well, and that board you flashed, Jackie, I mean, yeah, that's a concern, and I'm sure that Daryl Sutter and the rest of the organization will be, you know, rehashing the way this season has gone when they've got a chance to look back at it. I'm surprised for a team that played as connected, never mind offensively, as connected as they did defensively last year. This was a really well-structured team. I'm surprised that, you know, those numbers look the way they do, but that's not, those numbers aren't the problem. Those are the symptoms of the problem. They've been abysmal this year. They've been a shadow of what they were last year, and it starts with, you know, swapping into top six forwards for guys that had career years for you last year. That's an important part of the explanation. Gaudreau and Tkachuk out, Kadri and Huberdeau back in. It takes them a while to find their way. They haven't found it all the way back, not by a long shot. I don't know if there's a more important explanation. And EJ, I mean, I do. I think the technical aspects of the game that you're touching on are important. Again, kind of symptomatic of what's going on. But goaltending, to me, is perhaps the feature reason. I mean, for Jacob Markstrom, who many of us were talking about, was in the Vezina discussion last year. We're talking about being the top five in the NHL. It's hard to replicate, you know, one great year after another. But he's .890 this year when he was .920 last year. I mean, 30 basis points and his save percentage is a big deal.
He went off the rails in that series against the Edmonton Oilers last year. And
Everyone did.
And he's never, but he really did. I mean, but he really did, right? I mean, it was really concerning the way he played in that series, and he has just never really gotten it back. At the start of the season, it was a tough start to the season. We had some numbers indicating the first shots in games he was getting beat more often than well below the average of goaltenders on the first shot of a game. And when you're giving up the goal on the first shot of the game, right, you're now all of a sudden you're fighting an uphill battle the whole night. So the bad goaltending or inconsistent goaltending always undermines all the other things you try to do. So that hurts everything else. But again, I go back to the eye test for me. Watching that team last year, they were suffocating in the way they played. They gave you no time and space on the ice. They got to the middle of the ice. They were causing trouble in front of the opposing goaltender all the time. And when they had the lead, boy, they just strangled the life out of the game and they beat you. This year, They were not anywhere near as fast. They were not anywhere near as in your face on a night-to-night basis. And then you add that together with the fact that they were often find themselves behind in games because the goaltending was not adequate. You put it all together, and this is what you have, a ninth-place team in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and they're also 30th in the NHL after when they trail first in a game. So, again, that pushback. But I do, listen, the goaltending has not been great for the Calgary Flames. There's no justifying that. But I do think offensively they have not been the same team either. And it's hard when you lose a couple of 40-goal scorers from your lineup. And, Ej, you alluded to those numbers about getting into the inside. We talked about this while I was pumping the tires of one Matthew Tkachuk in Florida. So the fact of the matter is they went from a team that was somewhere top 5, top 10 in the league at creating scoring chances and shots from the slot, from the inner slot, high danger chances. They've gone from a top 10 team in the league to a bottom 10 team in the league. And when that happens, you're going to have trouble winning games. It's only magnified by the fact that you're playing from behind or you're not getting the goaltending that you're accustomed to getting. So I think it's a lot of things that have declined for the Calgary Flames, and it's been a culmination in them being and the point that they're at. It's actually kind of amazing that they're only 4 points out of a wild card spot, all things considered. When you look at all of these things, though, the numbers, the speculation that maybe Kadri and Daryl Sutter there's tension in that relationship. Reports that Sutter, to his credit, has denied. What does the future look like for Daryl Sutter here? Do you think potentially he is on the hot seat here? Yeah,
I definitely think he's on the hot seat. And I love Daryl Sutter. And I mean, this guy's won a couple of Stanley Cups. He's been a really good coach for a long time. I got a lot of time for Daryl Sutter, but this is a winning business, as they say, right? And this team has not won this year. And there's been like a little bit of a bubbling undercurrent to things about the relationships with some of the newer Flames, and he had that little kind of dust up of sorts with the young kid who was playing, and he talked to Jacob Pelletier, talked about like the numbers when asked a question about his performance, and that kind of almost belittling.
He read the score sheet.
Yeah, a little bit. So, I think they're going to have to take stock of a lot of things in the offseason, and I think coaches do have a shelf life in different places, and I think to answer your question, I absolutely think he's on the hot seat, and I won't be surprised if they make a change.
Well, at the coaching position, we tend to be a knee-jerk sport from the get-go. So, your finger's on the trigger when things start to go south, and go south in the way that they have for the Calgary Flames. But Daryl himself has proven over the course of his career, and I think you're making this point, EJ. I don't know that Daryl can be behind a bench for 6 or 7 or 8 years. He has a run, two Stanley Cups to their credit, and in the soon after, Daryl's being locked out of the room for some strange reason. The guys want to kind of police it themselves, and they've kind of heard the message before. I played for Daryl for 3 years as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. I do think he's evolved with the game. I don't think he's evolved to the point where some of the coaches behind some of the top-tier teams in our game today work with young talent and high-end talent in the NHL. I think there's a distinction there. All that to say, it was a hand-in-glove fit last year, but he had he had a handful of career years to go to bank on, and it made a difference in the confidence without question to the entire group.
All right, well, a tough task tonight for the Calgary Flames because they're 4 points out of a wild card spot. They're taking on the LA Kings, who are absolutely rolling. It's a 12-game point streak, 10-0-2 over that span, looking to make it 13. I got 3 names for you.
All right.
Kempe, Kopi, and Byfield. Take a look at their numbers over the course of this 12-game point streak. Kempe, 8 goals. Kopitar, 13 points. The line as a whole is outscoring the competition 12-2 at 5-on-5 over the last 12 games. So this line is clicking right now. Kempe, I think, has 36 goals on the season at this point, if I'm not mistaken. They have been a big part of this hot streak for the LA Kings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think we mentioned Adrian Kempe maybe last week, but again, we don't talk about him near enough. I mean, he kind of broke out. I think last year he had a really good year. This year he's sneaking up on 40 goals. they've really done a nice job with developing Adrian Kempe over the years. They stayed with him, and boy, he's a guy that can score from distance. He has great speed. And you can see here, most goals by a line 5-on-5. Interestingly enough, the Coyotes line led by Clayton Keller is putting up some significant numbers. But Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield. And it's, I think, a smart move. We had Luc Robitaille on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about moving Byfield into that line with Kopitar and Kempe. And, like, Byfield is going to benefit from playing on the wing right now. Big-bodied guy. Every time you come back to the bench, you're sitting next to Andrzej Kopitar. I mean, that's like going to a Harvard Business School or something right there. So really terrific for Byfield to have that opportunity, right?
You know, and too, you know, you see the success that a group like that is having. To me, it's an important byproduct of everybody, and this is generally through free agency over the last couple of years for LA. Everybody they've gone out and acquired, they have hit on. It's been a really remarkable bounce, and I think that resonates through the rest of the roster. And the guys I'm talking about, Danault, really notorious as a shutdown defender, but this is a guy that's on, I think, the precipice of having a better part of a 50-point season this year, 40-plus point season. Arvidsson has been fabulous. Fiala was a great cap grab out of
Gavrikov has been a great fit so far from Columbus, you know.
And really, if you go, I was going to make that point, as you go back to the deadline, the one kind of question mark around the Kings, this could be a top-tier team. This could be a team to come out of the West. What about goaltending? It appears they may have solved that. Korpisalo is undefeated in regulation. He's 4-0-1 since being acquired at the deadline. So I'm with you, Jack. Don't sleep on the LA Kings. They are a red-hot team out West.
Yeah, .929 save percentage for Korpisalo in those 5 starts
They
for
did
the
their
LA
homework.
Kings since
They
the
did their
deadline.
homework.
And, like, you know, to Copley's credit, you know, Copley doesn't have a .929 save.
He just wins.
But he gets wins.
He
like,
just
they
wins.
play so well in front of him, and I think it's a testament, again, to how good the Kings are as a team.
Yeah, they defend well. As I talked about all year long, they're a matchup nightmare because of, as Stu pointed out, having Danault in there as a 2 behind, you know, Kopitar, who is still one of the really high-end #1 centers in this league, takes some of the pressure defensively off Kopitar, takes some of the face-off pressure off Kopitar, takes some of the penalty-killing pressure off Kopitar. So all of a sudden, this team was a lot different once they made that acquisition, and the moves they've made around him have been really good, too. And the younger players like the Mikey Andersons have come in and developed. Byfield's being a factor now. Kempe has developed into a star player there. I mean, this is a really good team that is going to give, no matter who they play in the playoffs, again, it's a matchup nightmare because they're slotted so well. If they can just keep the puck out of their net, they're going to be really dangerous.
I think when you guys were on the air when we had this conversation with Luke going back a couple of years, and the whole approach to going out and getting the guys that I mentioned, like Arvidsson back then, was stabilize things to some degree while these young players are kind of growing into their NHL chops. And you know, that's been the blueprint. They've hit on those guys. They've done their homework. And it really looks good on Rob Blake, Luc Robitaille, and the rest of the operations crew.
It's pretty crazy that Kopitar line has the second most goals at 5-on-5 since All-Star Weekend, second only to the Keller line. What I would say is that the 2 goals against, just 2 goals against for that line at 5-on-5 over that span. I'd be curious to see how many goals against for the Keller line, just to compare, right? When you've got the Kopitar on the line that really is responsible defensively, I'd just be curious to see, not to take anything away from the Coyotes line, but just to kind of further prove the point of what the LA Kings are able to do and how good that line has been. Because, I mean, 2 goals against at 5-on-5 over the course of the streak, 12 games is pretty wild.
Yeah, the Kings haven't had a regulation loss going back to late February when it was here at Madison Square Garden against a pretty good Rangers team, so it's been a while.